Open any brokerage site right now and filter for saltwater boats. Center consoles, express cruisers, sport fishers, it does not matter which category you pick. Sort by price cuts in the last 90 days. You will see reduction after reduction, boats that were listed at one price in the spring now sitting 3, 4, sometimes 5 listing changes lower and still not selling. This is not one bad segment having a rough year. Marine industry sales were down 7.25% year over year in March of 2026 alone, following a decline of more than 5% the March before that. Used boat prices that held firm through most of the past decade are now falling across nearly every saltwater category at once, and the sellers who bought at the top of the market 3 or 4 years ago are the ones feeling it hardest. Today, I am walking you through exactly why. 5 forces are hitting the used saltwater market simultaneously right now, and understanding all 5 is the difference between panic selling a boat you do not need to panic sell or walking into the best buying window this market has offered in years. If you want breakdowns like this instead of sales pitches, subscribe now. Let's get into it. The first force is the quiet rise of boat clubs and shared access memberships, quietly pulling an entire tier of would-be buyers out of the purchase market before they ever call a broker. Freedom Boat Club, the largest operator in the country and a Brunswick Corporation brand, logged more than 640,000 member boating trips worldwide in 2025, a new global record, and more than 5% growth year over year, the club's 3rd straight year above 600,000 trips. 18 individual club locations each logged over 10,000 member trips in 2025 alone, 2 more locations hitting that mark than the year before. The club now counts roughly 60,000 memberships, putting somewhere around 100,000 people on the water through it, and a significant share of those members are in their 30s and 40s, exactly the demographic that has traditionally been the entry point into used boat ownership. Boating industry's own 2026 forecast put it directly. Club memberships and shared ownership models are holding steady, specifically because people still want access to the water, even while they delay the bigger purchase of actually owning a boat outright. Every member who chooses a club membership over buying a used 30-footer is a buyer who is not out there absorbing any of the inventory currently sitting on brokerage listings, and pre-owned boats already make up the vast majority of total boat transactions in the country, meaning a shrinking pool of entry-level buyers ripples through the entire used market at once. The second force is financing, and it has quietly eliminated a huge share of the buyer pool. The average boat loan rate closed out 2025 at 8.4%. According to LendingTree's own quarterly lending data, more than double what buyers were paying just a few years ago when rates bottomed out. On the same loan amount, that gap in rate adds up to a meaningfully higher monthly payment and thousands of dollars more in total interest over the life of the loan. For the exact same boat, a buyer could have financed far cheaper 3 or 4 years ago. Lenders have also tightened down payment requirements on older boats, particularly anything approaching or past 15 years of age, which describes a huge share of the saltwater fleet currently sitting on brokerage listings. Buyers who could stretch into a purchase 3 years ago on a lower rate and a smaller down payment simply cannot qualify for the same boat today, and that shrinks demand at exactly the moment supply is climbing. If this has been useful so far, hit subscribe, because the next 2 forces are the ones almost nobody talks about, and they are doing more damage than either of the first 2. The third force is insurance, and for saltwater boats specifically, this is brutal. Hurricane Ian alone destroyed more than 7,000 boats in Florida in 2022, a single storm loss that insurance industry sources have called the largest marine loss on record, totaling over $112 million in insured claims. Underwriters have spent every year since recalibrating around that risk. Boats stored or operated in hurricane-prone states now carry premiums 30 to 60% higher than the same boat inland, and Florida-specific projections for the 2025 to 2026 period point to an additional 15 to 25% premium increase tied directly to reinsurance costs and flood-related coverage requirements. On top of the base premium, named storm deductibles now commonly run 2 to 10% of a boat's insured value, meaning a $200,000 boat can carry a $10,000 to $20,000 deductible before a single hurricane claim pays out. Globally, insured catastrophe losses passed $100 billion in 2025, with over $40 billion of that tied specifically to storms in the United States, and marine underwriters have responded by tightening coverage terms across the board rather than just raising prices. Every one of those costs gets factored into what a buyer is willing to pay for a used boat sitting in a slip in a coastal state, and right now buyers are factoring in a lot more than they were 3 years ago.
The fourth force is tariffs, and while the effect is smaller than headlines suggest, it is real and it is compounding the other three. Since March of 2025, steel and aluminum tariffs have sat at 25% and have since expanded to 50% on a wide range of imported metal products, raising costs on aluminum trailers, hardware, and fittings across the entire industry. A separate reciprocal tariff framework introduced in April of 2025 added a baseline 10% charge on most imports, with European-built yachts facing tariffs of 20% or more on top of existing duties, though a trade agreement reached that July did carve out some relief specifically for recreational boats and marine engines. Boats built in Mexico or Canada can still qualify for tariff-free treatment under existing North American trade rules, but only if enough of the boat is genuinely built on this continent to meet the requirements. The direct cost increase on any single new boat is usually modest, since raw materials are a small fraction of a finished boat's price, but the effect compounds. New boat prices inch upward at the exact moment financing gets more expensive, which pushes even more buyers toward the used market, which increases used supply relative to demand, which pushes used prices down further still. The fifth force is the one that hits hardest on any individual listing. The math buyers now do in their heads before they ever call a broker. A saltwater boat built between the late 1990s and the mid-2010s is old enough that its engines are approaching the upper end of their documented reliable service life. Its electronics are running on software. Many manufacturers stopped supporting years ago, and it likely was never built to accept the gyroscopic stabilization and integrated helm networks buyers now expect as standard equipment on anything they consider modern. None of those three problems show up as a lower asking price on their own, since the boat still runs, the electronics still technically function, and the hull still looks the same at the dock. They show up as a buyer mentally subtracting a repower, a full electronics refit, or a stabilizer installation from whatever number is on the listing before they ever make an offer. A seller who has not done that same subtraction is going to watch their boat sit, while a buyer who has done the math walks toward the next listing instead, and every month of extra dockage, insurance, and depreciation makes that seller more willing to finally meet the market where it actually is.
None of this means these are bad boats. The segments taking the hardest hits, pontoons down over 10%, and personal watercraft down roughly 9% year over year as of the most recent reporting, sit right alongside categories like saltwater outboard boats, which are down less than 2% in the same period. Proof that this is not a uniform collapse, but a repricing that hits some categories harder than others, depending on how exposed their typical buyer is to financing and storage costs. The builders behind these hulls, from aluminum center console brands to established fiberglass sport fishing lines, did not suddenly start building worse boats. What changed is the cost of owning one. Financing got more expensive. Insurance got more expensive. New boat inputs got more expensive. And buyers, finally, started doing the math that sellers had been avoiding for years. For the buyer who understands all 5 of these forces, this is a real opportunity, not a warning to stay away. Get a full survey, including a haul-out inspection for hull condition and moisture, not just a walkthrough at the dock. Get a compression test and an oil analysis on the engines regardless of what the hour meter says, since a meter can be reset or swapped and tells you nothing on its own. Check the electronics against current manufacturer support status before you assume anything on the helm still works with modern add-ons, and factor in what a stabilizer retrofit would actually cost if the boat does not already have one. Get an actual insurance quote for the specific boat in the specific state before you make an offer, not after, since that number alone can change the entire deal, and it varies far more by zip code than most buyers expect. The sellers who understand these 5 forces and price accordingly are finding buyers. The sellers still anchored to what their boat would have fetched a few years ago are the ones you will find sitting on the market for months, getting more motivated with every passing week, and that gap between outdated expectations and current reality is exactly where the good deals in this market are sitting right now.